Ladies and gentlemen, civil war has broken out between the Dwarves. It's time for some more red-hot juicy Kings of War action. 2,000 points in this tournament warm-up game, testing out some lists. But to weave a little bit of a narrative for you, as you can see, in this underground ruined temple, the Dwarves are taking on the Dwarves. That is all because this Berserker Lord here, with a really big pair of butt cheeks, found a magical substance and stole it. Pilfered it, if you will, from the rival Dwarf King, and that is a vial of his magical beard gel that causes flight. So, he can fly, and he can now fly, but those dwarves haven't taken kindly to this theft and blatant copyright infringement. It had patent pending on it and everything. So, that of course has led to this inevitable conflict. So let's go over the forces, shall we? It's going to be the invade scenario. So each side will be attempting to reach the other side of the table with as many units as possible, which isn't very easy for dwarves because they're very slow, have a lot of war machines. Let's start with this side, shall we? So starting at this end of the table, what have we got?
2 individual troops of Brock Riders hiding right at the edge of the cavern, hoping they can swing around. Then we'll go to a horde of shield breakers. Next to those guys we have 2 regiments of Iron Guard, both with Mastiffs, looking to try and get down the gap in the centre there together. We have Army Standard, and behind a horde of Ironclad, so that's the backup horde, the Standard giving the bubble for the inspiring. And then moving into the centre we have 3 organ guns. Space limitations and tactical thinking has put 1 organ gun sitting slightly back for the eventuality of the enemy getting into our half. A king in the middle. This is the king who's furious, so he's inspiring this little area, with a horde of Ironwatch rifles guarding this left flank up against the terrain there. And just giving them a little bit of backup, there's 1 more regiment of Iron Guard, no Mastiffs on this regiment, and the rifle horde has got the +1 to hit with the brew of Keeniners, I think.
Right.
So
let's swing over to the other side. So starting down here, we have an Iron Belcher cannon right next to the Berserker Lord, who flies behind that piece of terrain there. As we swing on over here, we have some Ironwatch crossbows, a regiment of them to be precise, and next to them we have a Jarran or Yarran bombard. If anyone wants to tell me how to pronounce that exactly, then feel free. Then we have a regiment of Ironwatch rifles right there. Moving along further, we have a horde of shield breakers, very tasty, and you can see the king behind them. Next to an Iron Belcher organ gun and another Iron Belcher cannon. As we go down further, we have this unit of Iron Guard with 200 weapons, next to another Iron Belcher organ gun, and then another unit of Iron Guard with just the shield and the hand weapon. Behind them we have a unit of sharpshooters, a troop. There wasn't really a whole lot of space to position them because of the limited deployment area, because of the terrain, so they're having to stay behind a little bit and wait for some firing lanes to open up shortly. Then we have a regiment of shield breakers there, sandwiched in between that unit and this unit on the end, which is just your standard ironclad. So an awful lot of iron on both sides. Okay, so the thieving dwarves have had the first turn. Not a lot of movement down at this end, apart from the Berserker Lord, who has used his power of flight, which he acquired illegally, to fly all the way up there towards enemy lines. Everyone else on this side has stayed very, very still. But over here, all these units have moved up a bit. In fact, these units moved at the double. The Iron Guard and the shield breakers there. The sharpshooters creeping up a bit behind them as well, looking for an opportunity to find some firing lanes. Speaking of firing, the war machines that were actually in range were able to shoot, such as this cannon and this bombard and this cannon, but the only one that actually hit anything was this cannon here, which fired across there at the organ gun, put 4 damage on it, but couldn't get rid of it. So, it's going to be over to the dwarves that have been slighted now, to see if all that anger that they have against the thief, who is in very close proximity, is going to channel itself into some very nice dice rolling for them. If they even get to do any dice rolling this turn, which is debatable. Well, it seems that the message hasn't got to these very angry dwarves that they need to get to the other side of the table, because they're staying put, possibly out of fear of all this shooting that they would have to move into range of if they step forward even a tad. So a bit more on this side. That organ gun did move up actually, and then it had a healing charm on it that got 1 of the points of damage back from that chap down there. All these dwarves have moved up though, a little bit, staying out of range of these units. And over there the Brock Riders have come forward, looking to get some kind of sneaky flank action going. So no shooting from that side, because they're all out of range and they know that if they move and sacrifice a turn, they're going to be shot to bits in that one turn. Although that organ gun has moved up into range of a few things, so maybe he's got something sneaky up his sleeve, or maybe he's just got a death wish. We shall see. Okay, it's the thieving dwarves' turn too. And in the movement phase, there wasn't a huge amount that happened. Nothing at this end apart from Mr. Berserker Lord, who has gone all the way around the back there to threaten those units, staying just out of charge range of the enemy king, who can also fly in any direction. So he's being quite a threat and a menace back there. Over here some of these units edged up and rotated a little bit, staying out of charge range. Nothing too exciting, not very ambitious from either side at the moment, a bit of a standoff going on. But then shooting wise, where my dwarves have the edge because of the longer range, first of all, the cannons and the bombard all fired at what was directly in front of them, but the only one that hit was this cannon over here, which put a few points of damage onto those rifles there. The rifles then took aim at the organ gun, which was there, and so did this organ gun in fact, and the combined damage was enough to remove it after the reroll for the inspiring. So that organ gun is gone. This organ gun down here fired into that unit, which is Iron Guard, and put 2 points of damage on them, not enough to waver them though. So the way it's looking right now, both sides are going to have to think about advancing fairly soon if they want to get into the other half of the table, but there's so much shooting that it's not a very enticing proposition. So we'll see what happens next, because those dwarves over there, they've tasted first blood, their organ gun was blown up. Let's see if they strike back with a vengeance. So it's the angry dwarves' turn 2, and the presence of this Berserker Lord has caused quite a chess match to break out over on this side, because that organ gun has actually turned round to face him. These guys are looking at him as well. The king has repositioned himself to get himself in a favourable spot to deal with this impending menace. So we'll see how the dwarves over there approach the situation now that this lot have been somewhat distracted. Over here at this side, all these units moved forward, pretty much, and they are now within charge range, but the Brock Riders are also threatening from the flank. That one charged into the ironclad there, but only did 2 damage on them, due to some very poor dice rolling. And as far as shooting went, some throwing mastiffs were unleashed, just 1 actually, into this unit of shield breakers here, this regiment, and 1 point of damage was inflicted. And not much else happened actually. The healing charm was used to remove all the damage from this unit though. So let's see what happens in turn 3, shall we? Because we need to start getting a move on now if we're going to get to the other side of the table, really. Thieving Dwarf turn 3, and with the attention over there temporarily on Mr. Berserker Lord, who in fact charged the king, all the rest of these dwarves here decided now was the time to just move straight up there, including the war machines. They moved as well to get within striking distance. So they will be open to being shot, but then they will be able to hit back shortly. Over on this side, the Iron Guard charged into their fellow Iron Guard, who don't look quite so iron as these ones. The Ironclad countercharged the Brock Riders, and the Army Standard Bearer moved up a little bit just to inspire around this general region, and the Sharpshooters turned over to face this way as well in case there's any kind of breakthrough. As far as shooting went, all this stuff combined, which wasn't much because most of it moved, so it was pretty much just the bombard and that cannon over there on the flank. They fired into the rifles, put quite a bit more damage on them, but not enough to waver them. The Berserker Lord did 1 damage to the king in combat, couldn't waver him. Over here, the Battle of the Iron Guard, 2 damage was done there, not enough to waver again. And the Brock Riders took 4 points of damage from the Ironclad, but they can't actually be wavered, so it wasn't enough to remove them. So, no more casualties yet, but it is getting very spicy and congested over there. And now that the distance has been closed on this side of the table, I think we're going to see quite a bit of bloodshed over here as well. Angry Dwarf turn 3, and it's getting pretty crazy. So over here, the king countercharged the Berserker Lord, did 3 points damage on him, not enough to get rid of him though, because he can't be wavered because he's so nuts, and that magical beard gel isn't hindering that ability at all. It's not gone too much to his head. And the shooting that was unleashed from this organ gun and these rifles that were facing the right way managed to put 11 points of damage onto this shield breaker horde. So they're looking a bit vulnerable. The second organ gun also turned round, so next turn it's going to be able to join in with the shooting goodness. Over here, it all went very crazy. The Iron Guard countercharged these Iron Guard and rolled a huge number of 6s for damage, so managed to put 5 points of damage on them. Not enough to do anything though. The same can't be said over here. Even though the Brock Riders completely fluffed their rolls, only got 2 points of damage, but that was enough to waver these Ironclad. So we'll see whether they can avoid the effects of that momentarily. These Brock Riders and this shield breaker horde charged into the shield breaker regiment that was sitting right here, and you'll notice they're gone. That's because they took an obscene amount of damage and it would have taken a double 1 with a reroll, so it wasn't completely impossible, but they couldn't quite pull it off, so they have been removed from the game. So a couple of units down now, and it's looking very, very juicy at the moment. This side, no real engagement yet because all the shooting units are over there. Over here, the one advantage that the thieving dwarves have is that the battle is taking place slightly closer to the enemy side of the table, I think. But it doesn't make a difference if everything just gets wiped out over here. So the thieving dwarf turn 4 was a bit of a mixed bag. Over here, the shield breaker horde have moved up, getting close to all this firepower. This organ gun couldn't shoot anyone because its lines of sight had been blocked, so it decided to just move along with the king to try and get to the other half, since that is the objective here. Over here, these two shooter units, the rifles and the crossbows, along with the bombard and both cannons, all took aim at the rifles unit. Now, all 3 war machines missed, unfortunately, so that's the perils of taking these war machines. When they hit, they're devastating, but they don't hit all that often. So the other 2 units combined got them up to 11 damage, but not enough to get rid of them. And you can see there that the Berserker Lord went into the king, did more damage to him, got him up to 3, and then rolled quite high for the nerve test, so he's now wavered, so hopefully that'll prevent him counter-attacking. We'll find out though. Over here, the shooting from the organ gun and the sharpshooters into this Brock Rider unit here, this troop, 7 damage, not enough to remove them because they have an insanely high nerve value since they're berserkers. However, their brethren next door did get finished off by these Ironclad, who did quite a bit of damage on them, and then rolled very high to remove them from the game. So it's not looking quite so dead over there now, because those Ironclad have really held their own, and they're causing a little bit of a threat now to that huge blob of very angry dwarves. We'll see how they can respond to this, because this side is still looking in their favour. This side, it all comes down to whether they can remove this horde, I think. We shall see, because that horde of rifles, managing to avoid all of those war machine hits, could have saved their skins. So we'll see what they can do. Angry Dwarf turn 4. And first things first, the king failed his test, so he was unable to shrug off the effects of being wavered. This unit here charged into the Berserker Lord. They put more damage on him, but couldn't roll high enough to get rid of him twice in a row, because he is quite inspiring to himself. Over here you'll notice this huge blank area of the table where there is nothing, because the shield breaker horde was cut down mercilessly. The 2 organ guns fired first, didn't do that much damage. A throwing mastiff was launched from over here, again didn't do that much damage, so it was kind of borderline whether it was going to be taken away or not, and he decided he couldn't afford to risk it surviving, so he also fired with the horde of rifles into it and just completely pulverised it into submission. So that meant he wasn't able to shoot at any of the other potential juicy targets around here, so that could come back and bite them. But over here, again, it was quite eventful, because this big shield breaker horde and this unit of Iron Guard double charged my Iron Guard, did a reasonable amount of damage and got rid of them. So, looking a little bit bare right there as well. These Brock Riders that charged into these Iron Guard with double-handed weapons from over there, they decided this was the best course of action, because had they charged into the sharpshooters, they could have potentially been rear-charged by those Ironclad. So they went over here, and they only did 2 damage to those Iron Guard, so not much at all. And I believe that is everything. So it's going to be going on to the Thieving Dwarves turn 5, and there isn't a whole lot of units in the opposition side of the table right now. There's the Berserker Lord over there, there's the Brock Riders, and I think that's it at the moment, so time to change that. Thieving Dwarf turn 5, and you may notice that there's a lot of blank space over there where there used to be quite a dwarf gun line. That's because that huge horde of rifles were cut down by a hail of fire from all my static artillery pieces down here, and this unit of rifles, so it required a double one to save them, but they're toast. This unit of crossbows decided to make a beeline for the other side of the table, so they've given themselves enough space so that within at the double move in turn 6 they can get there, assuming they survive. That organ gun's probably eyeing them up with their positioning right now. Then the Berserker Lord decided, you know what, I can fly, why don't I just charge that organ gun? Because I will triple my attacks against it. And he just completely kicked its butt, and it's gone. So he just hacked it to pieces. So he's still alive and kicking over there. The organ gun's dead, so that's one less bit of shooting for me to worry about. Over here, the Iron Guard and the King double charged the Brock Riders and took them down. Up here, the Army Standard Bearer didn't help very much at all, but he joined in the charge with these Ironclad into this huge shield breaker horde, and only did 2 points damage in total, so obviously not enough to do anything to them. It's looking quite close at the moment. There aren't many units on the other side of the table. There's the Berserker Lord over there. These guys are poised to get into the other side of the table. And the Angry Dwarves, most of their units at the moment are somewhat pinned down. But we'll see, because they've got 2 turns and I've only got 1 left. So what can they do to get into the other side of the table? Probably kill things is the answer, because these units don't look too steady. Angry Dwarf turn 5, and again, very, very eventful. So over here, the King charged into the Berserker Lord, put more damage on him, and he's very, very close to disappearing, but couldn't quite get him due to a bad roll. So Berserker Lord is still alive and in the opposition half, so that could be crucial at the end. These Iron Guard pushed towards the centre of the table, so they're hoping that they're going to be able to move into my half in turn 6, or turn 7 if there is one. Over here, this combat here, between these 2 units of Iron Guard, only mine have the 200 weapons though. This unit of Iron Guard got them up to 4 points of damage, but couldn't get rid of them. And here, this big horde, this untouched horde of shield breakers managed to do away with the ironclad unit that were blocking their path, but they couldn't advance any further because there's the Army Standard Bearer there, so he's doing a good job right now. And it's still looking very, very close. There are certain units poised to leap into the other half of the table, but the Angry Dwarves are going to get the final turn regardless of how many turns we get, so they will have a chance to take the last strike. Thieving Dwarves turn 6, and the shape of the battlefield has changed once again. So over here, the Berserker Lord, fearing that he might be about to die, didn't fancy his chances at finishing off the King, so he decided to take out the final organ gun, which he did so quite easily because it was already damaged. These units moved forward. These crossbows were able to get into the opposing half. The rifles are well on their way, staying carefully out of charge range of that unit and that unit, so as not to invite anyone to overrun into my half, which would be a really bad idea. this organ gun, very sneaky, moved into the blind spot of this unit here, so they couldn't be charged either, which would have brought them into my half with ease. So hopefully they're stranded unless we get turn 7, which we very well might. All my war machines fired at them, by the way. Most of them missed, but the one that did hit, which I believe was the bombard, only 1 point of damage done there, not enough. Over here, these Iron Guard went into these Iron Guard, did 1 point of damage only. And here, the sharpshooters went into this huge horde, just to hold them up, not hoping to do any damage, and failed to do a single point of damage. And in a very sneaky move as well, the army standard bearer and the king have run as far as they can into enemy territory, so hopefully I suppose that guy could charge them, but I don't think that unit's going to be able to unless we get another turn. So hopefully they're just going to camp there and get me some much needed points. So potentially the last turn coming up for the angry dwarves, and they really need to get a move on, don't they? As well as hope for turn 7, I think. So it's the angry dwarves, turn 6, could end up being the last turn. And let's start over here, because I made quite a blunder and left the crossbows in charge range of this unit of Iron Guard. Rather foolishly. I was too concerned about looking for lines of sight, and there they were, ripe for the plucking, and plucked they were, so they were taken out by the Iron Guard. In the middle here, this unit, also Iron Guard, just moved as far forward as they could go. They're still lingering just on the edge, so they couldn't completely get into my half. Then, over here, in these combats, this Iron Guard frenzy, they did another point of damage onto mine, couldn't get rid of them. And these sharpshooters were wavered by the shield breakers in combat as well, which is lucky that none of these units died because their inspiring presence had run away to claim that half of the table. And we've just worked it out, and if the game ends right now, it's dead even, because also over there, the Berserker Lord was killed at the final hurdle by the king, who just rolled high enough to get rid of him twice in a row. So, because he died and that unit died, because of their foolhardiness, it's actually level right now, I believe, because this unit, which costs 170 points, is in my half, and those two characters who cost 170 points are in the enemy half. So, let's have a dice roll to see if the game ends now. On a 1 to 3, it ends in a draw. And it's a 1. So the game ends, and with a quick scan over the table, I don't think there's anything we missed.
No.
I think that ends as a dead draw, which is extremely unlikely in the circumstances.
Point for point draw, isn't it?
Yeah, so if my king had had a 5-point magic item on him, then that would have been a win. And I believe I actually had 5 points left over in my list as well. So I should have done that. So, although in other scenarios it would have been bad to pile more points onto a character, and it could have cost me. So,
but we didn't know which scenario we were going to get.
No, we had no idea which scenario was coming up, and that's the thing. Practicing for a tournament, you have to be prepared for everything. So, under these exact circumstances, we ended up with a draw. So I think we drew both our games last time as well.
Mm.
So that is quite outrageous. 3 draws in a row, if I'm not mistaken. And the first 2,000 point game that we've had with tournament preparation in mind. And I think I'm definitely going to be tinkering with this list if I'm thinking about taking it to a tournament. I need to buff up some of the units a little bit with some items, maybe drop 1 or 2 things. I think maybe I've got too many unreliable war machines, because the cannons are alright, but only hitting on 5s. I don't think you can afford to invest that many points in them. But I'm not sure. Maybe adding a warsmith with them as well to make them even tastier. And what do you think about your list? Do you think you need to do any tweaking over there?
I think, yeah, possibly for a tournament. I was hoping the Berserker troops would do a little better, but they don't do as much damage as I thought they would, although the nerve is good. And I struggled a bit down here for the movement with the hordes. This horde got totally stuck, whether that's just better deploying, or whether I need to maybe break one of these hordes up a bit perhaps. So yeah, I need to tinker a bit with it.
Right, so let's get the left-handed handshake on the camera.